I want to talk about a topic that's really important to me and why I really went about writing this book that Greg talked about, Integrative Advisory Services, and what we do as accounting professionals and how we have a purpose behind what we do to help people in their daily lives to really make an impact. And this is really what this topic is about today. Now, for us, a lot of things are transforming as far as technology, and it's coming fast. And what that creates a lot of times in our organizations is fear. The thing that we need to remember as we go through these transformations is that what has always differentiated us from technology and everything else is our advice and our expertise. Now, what happens though is a lot of times we spend our training budgets on our technical skills and new regulations and so forth, and we don't necessarily spend the same amount of time on soft skills and how we interact with others and how we can get the most out of the relationships that we have at work and with our teams. So that's what today is about. And I'm going to start off talking about a story that is why this is important to me and really changed my life and my family's life and why I became an accountant in the first place. So for those of you that were around in 1987, all of you know on this day, the savings and loans went down. And we were impacted by that in great ways. I grew up working in my mom's businesses. So my mom owned maid services, and she owned a number of offices in the Midwest. And from a young age, I would go in and help after school. And from the time I was 12 years old, I was actually dropped off from the bus to do that. And when you think about a business owner's life at that time, there wasn't technology. All the information was in their head. And they had to rely on that to make business decisions. And many times the financial statements that they would get from their accountant didn't come 6-9 months after the year was over. Well, my mom started out in residential house cleaning. And as her business grew and opportunities started coming in, which is true of many of our businesses, what happened was she started getting into commercial cleanup. And what commercial cleanup is that you start going in after movie theaters are built and big construction jobs. And what changed about our business was it wasn't, I get paid right after I do the work. I now get paid off of construction loans. Now, during this time, she had an accountant, but again, she didn't get her information until 6 or 9 months after the year. And she was an art teacher by trade. And so what happened was, when this happened in 1987, all those construction jobs started defaulting, and those construction loans started defaulting, which meant that she didn't get paid. And it left her with a choice. Do I pay my staff, or do I pay my payroll taxes? And which one do you think she chose? Right? So what that meant was the IRS was after our family for many years. We lost everything. We had to sell our house. We had to sell everything inside of our house. And I actually had to watch people come into my bedroom, haggling over my bedroom furniture and things that meant, what meant something to me, that didn't mean something to them. And start working 3 jobs at 16 years old so that we could have groceries. Things turned around very fast. Now, at that time, when I started thinking about this story later, you start thinking about the accountant and what they were seeing. So, as the accountant, they had been doing her tax return for many years, and we're seeing fluctuations that were happening in that tax return. And we need to think about what is our responsibility to speak up and ask the questions, why were there changes this year? So that if she would have spoken up to say that this was now because she's working on construction loans, the accountant could have started talking to her about how do you properly manage cash flow. Now, we need to think about our jobs in that way of how we can be more proactive rather than reactive so that we get asked to be at the table up front. And I know as controllers and CFOs, I've been in your seat, that a lot of times it's hard because we get the information after the fact. And what we really need is to be there at the beginning of the conversation, to be asked to be at the table so that we can give our advice and make sure that the business does not go in the wrong directions. But to do that, we need to think about how do we change that relationship so that they see us in a different way. The other question I would ask is, how you decided to be an accountant in the first place. So I know for me, I knew that it was a stable career. My grandfather had been a CPA. My mom had chosen a different path. And when I was doing those networking events with my mother and in her business, when I'd ask other business owners what I should graduate in, they all said accounting. And the reason was because accounting would help you make better business decisions. Now, when I wrote this book, I stepped back from that conversation. That was the first time I rethought that answer that I got. And was like, why are they saying that? There's a problem there if they're saying that. Because we shouldn't have to go to medical school if we have a medical problem. We shouldn't have to go to law school if we have a legal problem. So there's some gap between what business owners need versus what we're delivering, where they feel like they need our financial background to be able to make those business decisions. And it's important for us to close that gap. So what I'm going to ask you to do right now, if you can go to my website, amyvetter.com/join session. It's the same survey tool, but it's linked into my presentation. And if you have the social Q&A, still use the AICPA app for that. But you'll go to amyvetter.com/join session and choose join here. Now, I'd like you to think about that question for yourself. And I'm going to unlock that first question. And that is, why did you become an accountant? And be honest. Money. Stability, stable job, family business. So absolutely, out of all the times that I ask this question, most of the answers are in 3 categories. Job security. I was good at math. I didn't see that one yet. I don't think. Oh, enjoyed accounting, right? Or my father was a CPA. Right? Our 3 biggest reasons, and then there's other reasons as well. But I think it's an important thing to really assess about why anyone goes into the careers that they do, because we go into those careers because we're good at something, we're good at a skill. But sometimes we're actually not, because a career test told me to. My career test told me I should be a tattoo artist. And I didn't listen to that one, so I think it's important to think about this, because a lot of times we don't think about who the person is on the other side when we're delivering what we love to do, right? That what is our why for doing it? Beyond being good at math, beyond being good at accounting, beyond job security and making sure our families are secure, when we are delivering the work that we're doing, what is our why? What is the purpose behind it? And this becomes really important because not just from a soft skills perspective, but when you're putting in new technology at the same time, really defining what that purpose is, that bigger why, then everything else starts falling into line. Now for me, my bigger why is I never want a small business owner to go through what my mom did, to go through what my family did. I see that vision in my head when I'm talking to another business owner and trying to give them advice because of the issues that they can get in because they don't even know what we know and how we can help them. But why this becomes important is that a lot of times we have beliefs of our why versus our purpose, our soul of our why. We've been told a lot of things throughout our lifetime, starting from when we were a child, of what we should be, what we should do. And we start not being able to decipher, is that our beliefs or is that somebody else's beliefs? Versus, what is our soul? What is our purpose? How do we know we exist? And when we can define that purpose, not only for ourselves, but for our teams, then that becomes the mission of what we do in our departments. And rather than evaluating based on, did we get the job done on time? Meeting deadlines, how profitable or efficient we are, did we deliver on our why for our department? Did we deliver in our organization what we wanted to put out there into the world of how we were going to help the organization? That is part of the evaluation process of how we do our work. So in order to get there, I've coined this term becoming a cherished advisor, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means and the steps to get there. But what is important to realize is that there is a divide. I was just at the CCH conference as well, speaking there and talking to their CEO. They've done a similar report to what the AICPA CGMA report found. And there is a divide between how well we think we're doing our job versus how well the business thinks we're doing our job. So from the perception of the CEO, when you look at this, is 1 in 3 CEOs don't think their CFO is providing what they need. And really trying to seek to understand in our organizations, are we providing what that organization is craving from us? That we are helping them to try to figure out how to actually get into that operation and improve the results this year and into future years? Are we answering those questions for them, or are we really focused on our own work and our own deadlines, and we're not creating that space to be able to deliver it in the way that those CEOs would like to see that information? And this is really changing what I call credence good to experience good. Credence good means, I know they're smart, I know they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, I get my reports on time. Versus experience good, I can't imagine not having this controller and their team as part of my company because of the value that they provide us. That's a really different experience. So how do we seek to understand what information the organization wants from us versus what we're pushing into the organization to make sure that we have this meeting in the middle so that they feel like we are a value into the organization? So I want to ask you, when you see the word trusted, what do you think? What words come to your head? Just yell it out. Honest, reliable, integrity. Absolutely. So the definition is regarded as honest and sincere. Okay? And we've always been called trusted advisors. And when we think about that term, sometimes we have been called that term for so long, we don't really connect with what does an advisor mean to somebody else. That we know we're an advisor. We know as a profession, we are the most trusted profession there is, above everything else out there. Lawyers, banks, everything. Accountants, number 1 trusted profession. But what I would propose to you is that being trusted is what we should be. We have the most sensitive information at our fingertips in our organizations. So if we are not trusted, we're not really doing our job. And we're not holding up credibility in the profession that we're in. When you hear the word cherished, what comes to mind? loved. What else? Valued. Appreciated. Exactly. We almost got them perfectly on that definition. So clung to, treasured, highly valued. This, to me, is the guiding light for where we want to be in our organization. In order to be cherished, we need to earn being cherished. It's not something that we just are. We have to provide services and value into the organization for other people to feel that we are a cherished advisor in that organization. So it's something for you to think about is how do you create that as a guiding light for yourself and all the people around you as well as you set goals into this year. And part of doing that is creating a learning plan on soft skills. Not just the technical skills, but how we actually work to collaborate with the rest of the organization and our teams. So soft skills are the attributes to help us interact effectively and harmoniously, that's a key word here, with other people. And so I've kind of broken down to start off just 6 attributes of soft skills, and some of them you might be really good at, or your team members might be really good at, and some of them, you look at them, and those might be opportunities of learning areas that you might want to think about in the coming year to really focus on for yourself or your department. So let's start off with being responsive. A lot of times, businesses complain that their accountant isn't responsive, and from our perspective, we're not because we're so busy. We're trying to get all of the work done, and we don't have time to actually look up to be able to get back to someone in an expedient fashion. Now, when you think of responsiveness, a lot of times we've taken this on ourselves, that we have one-to-one relationships, that we assign one person to one department or whomever we're serving, rather than thinking about a total customer experience within your department. So how can you actually reorganize your department of figuring out how would you be responsive to the rest of the organization with certain issues that come up? Who do they contact? Or electronically, how would you be able to get back to them right away with questions that come up all of the time? Now, collaboration is, to me, one of the most important circles in this, because a lot of times when people talk to their CFO, their controller, their accountant, they don't feel smart because they know we know things that they don't know. And it's important that we think about how do we do that in a way where there's mutual respect and we actually come back to them in their language. Rather than speaking in our language, how do we take their pain points and communicate it back in a way that they'll understand? That they don't want, so I call this a lot of times, the elevator conversation, where you've got an accountant speaking with their stakeholders, and you're going over all these numbers, and everybody's shaking their head, yes, I understand. And then they get in the elevator, and they turn to each other and like, do you understand what she said? Nope. Did you? Nope. So it's important that we know that they understand what we're talking about in order to make the impact that we want to make on that organization. Now, collaboration is a way of making sure that we're listening for their pain points and we can communicate it back. Influence is the ability to have someone make a decision one way or the other and possibly get it in the way that you wanted, but maybe coming at it in a different way. And a lot of times in our profession, influence is tied to titles rather than the skill of influence itself. You can be influential at the lowest level of a company if you know how to do this, if you know how to build compromise and be able for people to walk away getting what they wanted and everybody feeling like they walked away from the table with what they wanted. This is a skill that has to be practiced and learned in order to make sure that you can be effective. Problem solving. This one is the ability to think on your feet. And part of thinking on your feet is being comfortable with, I don't know. I'll get back to you on that. A lot of times we aren't responsive because we might get asked a question that we don't know, and we get worried about what that question might be and not having the answer, so we don't have the conversation, rather than being comfortable enough to say, I don't know, I'll get back to you. I started my first accounting practice when I was 27 years old, and I started it thinking I was going to run a bookkeeping service. I was an auditor by background, did internal audit and external audit. And when the customers started calling, they weren't calling for bookkeeping. They wanted to do their own books. And then they were asking me all of these questions, and I realized real quick I had to be good at, I'll get back to you on that. And what I found was they appreciated that. They didn't expect me to have the answer right away. They wanted to make sure I would be responsive in getting back to them with an answer as soon as possible. So if I could say, I will get back to you in 24 hours or 48 hours with an answer on that, that was sufficient. So practicing how you can get comfortable with that as well. Leadership, again, is not necessarily a person or a title. It's that you start defining the experience that the rest of the organization is going to have with your department so that they feel safe, that they've got the right accounting and finance department in their organization, that you are there for their needs. And you can explain what their customer experience is going to be like. That's leadership. And then lastly is project management. Now, more and more, I'm seeing in the accounting profession, non-CPAs being hired into accounting departments and CPA firms that are experts in product management. Because what they do is make sure that the customer experience, so thinking about yourself not as a cost center, but a service center, and servicing the rest of the organization, making sure there's a project manager to ensure all the work that's being done by all of the staff is being handled on time, and any anomalies that you're seeing, you're able to immediately alert those departments and be able to get back to them. That's a skill, project management. And those project managers also can be out in the organization being your cheerleader with their ear to the ground of what else is happening in the organization and bringing it back to you. So when we think about this, we need to think about how do we design the experience that somebody is going to have with our department. And this is the entirety of the interactions. Every single person that's in your department, what kind of experience do you want people to have with your department that would be differentiated? That they would feel like you're an advisor, you're a strategic department that should be involved in these conversations. So one is getting back to that mission statement, not the mission statement you put on your website, not the corporate speak. The real why, coming back to your belief systems as a team. Why do you do what you do? What is important to you? How do you want to help the industry that you're in or the people that work in your company so that they have jobs tomorrow, that their families are protected? What is that bigger why of what you do? And start making that your brand promise that you give out and that you talk about. So you're telling other departments, this is our brand promise to you as the controllership group, as the accounting and finance department. And this is how to expect what our interactions are going to be like. And when you're evaluating people on your team, how do you evaluate them against that brand promise, not just on the financial return and all of the compilation work? How will you deal with customer support? Who's assigned to do that? How do you create segments in your department where at the lowest levels of your department, they can start becoming subject matter experts within the organization to be able to be outward and proactive in that organization? And then really think about the life cycle of these different departments and what they need and how you can help them. And lastly, what's really important as you start documenting your business processes is that you realize that in today's world, We are never going to be able to put in a business process or a piece of technology and walk away for 20, 30 years and be like, we're good. We are now in an agile work environment that forevermore we are going to have to be so good at knowing what we do, what our business processes are, and how we can make things just a little more efficient, drive a little more value, so that each year we keep assessing and redeploying what we do and keep making it a little more better, that we're never satisfied. So being proactive versus reactive means that we need to think about every stage of that customer life cycle that hits our department, from awareness of how we're going to proactively market our services to the rest of the organization and let them know what we do, from discovery. What this means is I'm going to go out to these departments and actually ask them, what do they need from us, rather than what we push to them? And then how do we build this relationship so that they start seeing us as a strategic advisor and they start advocating for us and the rest of the company of how different this experience they're having than they've ever had with an accounting and a finance department before. And lastly, how we continuously service them and reassess how we do that. So I break this down into 3 phases. The first phase is securing the relationship. So being a treasured resource, and we defined that before, means that we do more than the accounting work. We actually think about what other things can we do to add value into the organization. So thought leadership, actually going out, maybe creating your own blog for your department or whatever that is, or creating expertise or interviewing other departments of issues that are coming up that you need to get back to them on. Strategic partnerships inside the organization, so there's advocates, but also outside of the organization, so that any issues that that organization is encountering, you know someone that you could bring into the organization to help them. And that goes with referrals and networking, and also hosting lunch and learns or other types of events where you can be educating the organization on how to be more financially savvy and how it helps their operations. So when we're doing blogging and newsletters and thinking about this outbound communication that we're going to give to the organization, it's important we think about putting it on a cadence. And anyone in our departments can blog. And the thing about blogging is that you might not be the best writer, or when you get into writing, you think you can write, and then it starts being a time suck, and it's like an hour, 2 hours goes by. So if in your organization you have a copywriter or a ghostwriter, ask them to help you with doing this in your department so that you can start getting information out to other departments about things you're seeing, case studies of ways you've helped other departments or things you're seeing in the organization, or some of the latest trends that they should be up to date on. Hosting seminars and training, really thinking about not only it has to be you to do that training, but some of those strategic relationships that I talked about that you develop, how do you bring them in-house and do some training with the rest of the organization that could be helpful to them on totally other topics, legal, vendor setup, whatever it is that might help you on the bigger picture, but it sets you as a central expert by bringing those people in and having that central place. Now, when you are doing discovery with these departments, and this is important, that you create outreach teams within your department to go out to other departments in the organization and ask them what they need from you. And when you go through this, think about it that it's all open-ended questions, that you are not talking much. You're asking them what keeps them up at night. What are the things they're concerned about? What are the issues that have either helped them meet their goals or that they're missing their goals by, and how you can help them? And ask them, what are the KPIs that they're looking for in their department where you could actually provide that information to them on a monthly basis to speed that up for them so that they get value from your department as a service organization that helps them meet those overall goals that feeds into a better financial result. Yes.
Is this on? Okay. Thank you so much. One question that came in, and I wanted to raise it now because it ties, I think, right into what you're saying. I'll state the question. Thank you to the folks online who had posted this. The question is, Amy, oftentimes the finance department is viewed as the top cop. What is a good opening gambit beyond, quote unquote, we are here to help, that you have found to be effective on helping to tear that perception down and turns them into advocates for finance? Question.
Yeah, so the question is being the cop versus the advisor within the organization. And I do think this is a mindset shift within your department first. And that's something that's really important to permeate into the organization. And I talk a little bit about this as we move on into the presentation of what we need to do with our staff. But it's important that when people come into an organization, they're ready to take on the world. Okay? If you remember starting your job, you were excited. And then little by little, maybe you start getting squashed along the way, right? You have this idea where you could help the organization, or you have this idea where you can help the organization. You're like, no, we've always done it this way. This is the way we're doing it. If we don't start it in our department first and allowing that freedom of innovation and do little tests with the outside organization, so maybe pick just one department that you could test this with, not everybody, but pick one department. And for someone in your department that's really gung-ho about doing this, make them the leader of this situation and have them go out and try it. See what works, see what doesn't work, and then what you do is once that goes really well, you start getting testimonials from that department. And when you start sending out newsletters and other expertise type stuff to the other departments, you can start taking testimonials from this department. This work that we just did with the finance department helped turn around our inventory turnover ratio in the last month so that we're not having to write things off anymore. Now that starts permeating into the organization. You're not going to do it all at once, but creating this innovative and test group within your departments will help to be able to create that and create more excitement in your departments so that they can make an impact. So the other thing that's important about this discovery phase, when we go out to other departments to ask them what keeps them up at night, is we're going to come back and present to them how this experience is going to be different, and we're going to communicate it based on their pain points. So exactly what they told us, we're going to repeat back to them. You said you're kept up at night because you're not sure where the inventory is going. Well, we're going to make sure that we run this program for you so that we can get down to the bottom of it, be able to help you, be able to make sure that this is more predictable every month and you don't have this issue anymore. So when we can communicate it in a different way, it captures their attention and they know that you are there listening and you care. You're not just trying to push, even though you might have done the exact same thing, you're doing it in their words. The second part is creating this advisory relationship. And part of the problem with technology is we don't disconnect from it a lot of times. So I remember when I was a CPA firm partner, I would get joked with all the time that I would reply faster than I got the email. So it's important that the facts on our phones is that we look at our phones 150 times a day, which equates to 2.5 hours a day, 38 days a year. Every time you're in a meeting with someone and you look down at the phone and you say, just hold on 1 second, let me just take this. Oh, hold on 1 second, let me take this phone call. We start changing that experience with the other person where they think they're not as important, even if we don't intend for that to happen. So I went to a funeral once that my coworker, it was his brother that died, and I happened to live in South Florida where his brother had lived. So I had said, I'll go to the funeral to represent the team, with him. So I'd never met his brother. But at this funeral, it was really impactful to me because each person that got up to talk about his brother, the first thing that they said was, he was my best friend. And then by the fifth person saying this, it started becoming a joke. And they're like, well, I thought he was my best friend. But the through line in the stories was that he was present. That someone said he never wore a watch and somehow he was always on time and he knew when to leave. And because he was present, it changed the experience. And if we think about how many times we get distracted or we're not paying attention to the other person we're meeting with, it changes the experience, or that person has their own interpretation of why they think they're not important to us, even if that's not even our intention. So in order to create an advisory relationship, we need to make sure we're paying attention and that we have time management where instead of a 30-minute meeting, maybe make a 25-minute meeting. Instead of an hour, make a 50-minute meeting, so that you know when you're going to handle emails and phone calls, but that when you're with the other person, you're completely paying attention. Now, why we aren't present is we have our own things that are happening inside us. Is that we have this internal busyness syndrome that if we're doing nothing, we think, well, I should have something to do right now. We can't just be still or just be in the present moment. Our minds have trouble thinking like that. Or we have what's called attentional blink, where we're talking to somebody else and we start thinking about another story in the future or the past. That might be happening while I'm talking. That's okay. It's natural. But it's important to realize that these things happen so that we can start training our mind to be more present in the situations when we're around other people. One of the ways is when we have conference calls with people, they are either multitasking, which is impossible because our brains don't work that way, or we're multitasking. So one thing that you might want to try that's a little thing is turning on the webcam. Those eyeballs, by research, is what creates a relationship. So if you are dealing with people in other states, in other countries, start building in video conferencing and turn on the camera so that you can create a real human relationship with somebody. That it's not so businesslike, and that you can have those conversations where you become friends. Now, the other thing that I was talking about our, sometimes we're not thinking on our feet, and it's like we want to be the expert. Well, how do we become an expert? We get a question we've never been asked before, we research it, and then we're the expert. And I would always talk about this with my staff, that this is how you become a subject matter expert. And what's important, though, in our departments is as we start being this service center rather than a cost center, everybody is learning different things and becoming an expert in something. Where do you share the information that everybody's learning that week, that month? In your meetings, do you create time for people to speak up and say, I had this issue that happened with this department this week, and this is what I learned, and how I was able to resolve it. So how can you bring in that learning and allow for people to learn the experiences that everybody's having? Now let's talk about building a lasting relationship. So first off, we need to know our departments from a human level. Being their confidant is even knowing when they don't like their boss or their coworker, knowing about their pets or their family members, that we start creating that relationship that bonds us, where they don't just see us as the finance function, they see us as a human that cares. So building that into our relationships and training ourselves to ask those questions if it's not natural to you is important to think about. If you start building a strategic relationship with another department, what you should think about is, And rather than being reactive, creating a cadence of meetings with those departments. So if you say, we're going to go over some KPIs that are really important to your department, and every month we're going to meet with you on it. And that we create an agenda for that meeting. It's not just a free flow meeting, that we set up before that meeting. Here's what we're going to cover. Do you have anything else you have questions on that you want to add the agenda to? And make sure that you have time for, I hate my boss too, stories. That's fine. But it's important to include all of that in that meeting and be proactive, because it's amazing when they know you're going to come out and talk to them, how much they save up to talk to you about, because they know you're going to have that meeting. Now, when we deliver the numbers, rather than delivering it in our financial way that they may not understand or it doesn't mean anything to them because it doesn't relate to their operations, learn how to tell a story. So when you go to a play or a musical, it's usually set up in 3 acts. Act 1 is setting up the situation. Act 2 is the problem that you're seeing, that you're encountering, that you have to overcome. And Act 3 is your recommendation or advice that you would give them to resolve that situation. So if you can start thinking about how do you present the financial statements as a story rather than numbers, they start seeing you in a different way, not as the cop. As a storyteller, that you actually got into their operations, you asked the questions, you saw what was going on, and here's what I'm going to deliver to you as a way that we could overcome this next month. Now, when we go through this, I want you to think about that a lot of times, and I love that question about us being the cop, that we evaluate ourselves differently than our stakeholders might evaluate us. So I want you to answer this on your app. How do you know your stakeholders are happy with your services? I still have a job. You don't. They recommend me. They say thank you. What they tell others, they smile. And it's really important for you guys to read through what everybody's saying here. There's one I saw, a survey. What I haven't seen here is a measurement tool for you to actually evaluate, are the other departments and is the rest of the organization happy with me, happy with our department? And sometimes we get worried about asking this question, but there's no way for us to improve if we don't ask the question, if we don't know what the issues are so that we can improve it. So one of the things that many of your organizations do with customers is Net Promoter Score. How many people have that in their organization already? So 25% of you. So if you already have that, you can use it internally. If you're not using it, it's a really quick way to be able to evaluate your effectiveness. Because what Net Promoter Score is measuring advocacy. Or would someone recommend what you do? And if they recommend what you do, they're not seeing you as a cop, they're seeing you as a service to the rest of the organization. So the question is, would you recommend me to a colleague? And they evaluate you on a 0 to 10 scale. A 9 or a 10 is a promoter. A 7 or an 8 means they're neutral. That means you still have a job. And 0 to 6 is a detractor. You may not have a job next year if the stuff's not improved. And so with Net Promoter Score, you throw out the 7s or 8s because they actually don't care one way or the other. And you take the percentage that were the 9s and 10s and you subtract out the percentage that were the detractors, and that comes to be your Net Promoter Score. That basically gives you a baseline. Now there's 2 more questions that are important to ask. So this should take someone a total of 5 minutes to answer. If you gave me a 9 or a 10, how did I earn that? What did I do to earn that? And that's a really important question because you should know what you're doing well so that you promote more of it and you're making sure everyone in your organization is doing it. But if I didn't earn a 9 or a 10, what could I do different to earn a 9 or a 10 next year? And that helps you build into your service plan how you can start changing the appearance of your organization so that you're driving that back into the results. Is there any questions you want to go to before I... Okay. So this last segment, as we talk about what goes on externally, let's think about internally with our team. Because like I said, we have to start there in order to change the relationship. So, like you heard in my introduction, I've created a methodology called the B3 method. And I am an accountant, so it's going to be a formula. It's easy for us to understand. But so, business is these situations I'm talking about. The stressful situations we get in at work, or with other departments, or with our staff, whatever it is. But balance are what comes natural to us with soft skills, where we can offset these stressful situations in order to create what I call bliss. And in yoga, bliss is the maintenance of happiness. So in order to create happiness in your departments and in your organization, it's not a one-stop thing. It's some days they love you and some days they don't. And how do you maintain that? How do you keep shifting it so that you can get back to that happiness mark? So one of the things that's really important is that you have fun. One of the things that happens to us when I talk about innovation and creativity in this is that we lose as we become adults being creative because we're afraid to fail. When we're children, we learn all sorts of things all of the time. There's all these different subjects coming at us. But then when we're adults, we become an expert in something, and then we don't like when we don't know something. So what's important is, how do we get back to this beginner's mind? That we do something outside of work, or we take time to learn about ourselves in order to be okay to fail at work. So when we take one of these test pods and figure out with a department, how could we change the service level? How could we change our interactions and be creative about it? Be okay with something didn't work. But let's learn from it. Not quit, but how do we learn from it so that we can continue the paradigm of we want to get to that shining star of being cherished. So what went well, what didn't go well, so that we feel comfortable. We have to create a culture within our department so people feel okay and they don't become branded as a failure just because they tried something and didn't work. That it's okay because they tried it. Now, in order to do this, we have to create time in our day. So on average, and in the accounting profession, I'm sure our averages are way higher, but on average, supervisors, managers, and above work 47 hours a week. Only 6.5 hours of that week is for our own work. Everything else is filled up with meetings and so forth. If we don't control our calendar, nobody else will. And we have to make time to make sure that we are pulling ourselves back from working in the business and working on the business and giving ourselves time to give ourselves some freedom in our minds and our brains so that we can be creative and innovative. The problem is when we set time for ourselves on our calendar and someone books a meeting, then we go, oh, that was just for me, so I'll just let that go. But every time we do that, we steal from ourselves and we steal from the people around us. So in order to change the paradigm, we have to think about how do we change that calendar? So when we put in technology, a lot of times we don't at the same time come up with the human side of that technology as well. So I'll give you my own example that when I had my business, I would be out running around to clients all day long, Then I'd get home, eat dinner, spend time with the kids, and then I'd start working again at 8 o'clock at night and start doing emails. One day, I heard my staff joking about the 8 p.m. emails. So I perked up, and I walked over, and I was like, my emails? My 8 p.m. emails? And they said, yeah. So I said, do you think I expect you to respond to me at 8 p.m.? And they said, yes. I never had expected that. That was just the time I could get my work done. And this is the critical thing of communicating about the technology we use. That we speak up to our staff and say, this is the times that I work. I know we all work different times. I do not expect you to work at night if I'm working at night. Now, with technology today, we can actually schedule when emails go out. So if you're working at 8 o'clock at night, schedule it to go out at 7 a.m. the next morning so that someone doesn't feel the pressure to answer it. But that's the time you get it done. Yes?
Yes, Amy. There's one question that came in, and actually it dovetails right into what you're saying. First, I'm going to state the question, then I'm going to make a comment about the question. The question is, in the age of technology, how do you disconnect and create space for yourself while generating the best business results? And I think that question is intended as far as how you think about that for yourself, but I think it's also relevant to maybe expectations that you set with your team.
Yes.
In terms of what you just said a moment ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we set these expectations with our team, it's not only communicating and because everybody's working different hours now. There's no such thing as 8 to 5 anymore with the way technology is and how we can work. And that's a good thing, that we can get to things that we never could get to before, our kids' games and so forth. We're not tied. So that's the availability. However, the other piece we need to think about is if you're on Slack, if you're on email, if you're on text, if you get phone calls, if you've got instant messaging within your technology at your company, have you set up rules of engagement for each one? And what I mean by that is, do you feel like you have to communicate the same message on all 5 ways so that somebody reads it? Or does everybody know what you use Slack for, what you use instant messaging for, what you use email for? And this becomes really important because it starts creating more stress, thinking like, now I have to communicate in 5 ways instead of 1. So when we start putting this into place, think about how do we make sure that we're communicating the human side of the technology at the same time so that everybody's aware of how to use it and when to use it. Now, this is the yogi side of me coming out, okay? So I own a yoga studio as my other side. I'm a yoga instructor. And I really believe in using our human tools to help us be more present and setting time to do this. So I call these the 3 M's: meditation, mantras, and mindfulness. And you can pick what works for you. One of them, a lot of times meditation and mindfulness get confused, and they're different. Mindfulness is that outside awareness of what is happening around us, that we're so present that we hear everything someone's saying and we understand their body language. Like a mindfulness practice is you could take a walk and you're really silent and you're trying to hear the furthest leaf rustle, the furthest bird chirp. It starts training our minds so that we don't lose the biggest business opportunity that we might not hear if we're not paying attention. Now, meditation is, I term it as a 2-minute meditation that we can fit in our day. Now, as a yoga studio owner, I will tell you that people are more afraid of meditation than CrossFit. Because we have to be alone with ourselves and allow whatever's coming on the inside. But why this is important, especially in the corporate world and all the things that we deal with, is we might come from a really stressful meeting or interaction, and if we don't take a moment and reset ourselves, we bring that into the next interaction, and it starts spiraling throughout the day. So how can we change that time where we have 5 minutes or 10 minutes between meetings? And if you shut your eyes for 2 minutes, it actually shifts your nervous system. But that means you don't peak. That means you set a timer. Set a timer on your phone, whatever it is, and you set it for 2 minutes, it will alarm off, and it will be amazing what the shift is that happens in your body so that you can be present for that next meeting. The other thing is mantras, which some of you got this as you came in, of flyers of mine that you can use as table tents as a reminder. So I use mantras to shift my energy. A lot of times we don't set an intention for our day of how we want to show up. But I'm a musician as well, and there's something in music called grace notes for people that play music. They're these tiny little notes on the page. But when your fingers play them or when you sing them, you gloss over them really, really fast. But if you don't play them, the music sounds completely different. So I use this as my mantra to remind me to not miss the grace notes in the day. Because someday the day starts coming at you, and you actually need, when you're in a, if your eyes pass a mantra, you put it on a Post-it note, whatever it is that you want to show up with that day, being more positive, seeing the best in somebody else, whatever it is, it's a reminder to you of how you wanted to show up that day. And so even if you get off track and then your eyes gloss over it, you're like, oh yeah, that's what I wanted to do. Now, active listening is something we need to practice. So this is something on your goal sheet that you might put in there that you need to practice. So that's open-ended questions. That's when you have meetings with your staff and you're not necessarily in the office. That you take a walk with them instead, outside or inside if you've got big buildings, and have that meeting moving. It's amazing what difference the conversation can have. Go to the coffee shop, whatever it is, so that you learn a little bit more about your staff, understand their goals and their aspirations as well, or what's happening in their personal lives, so that you can help them as well as a leader. Now, if you have remote staff, same goes for remote staff. The webcam needs to be on. And we have to get away as a profession that you need to be dressed a certain way to turn the webcam on. I mean, appropriate, but you need to make sure that the webcam is on because, again, people might not be paying attention in the meeting if the webcam's not on. Secondly, how do we connect? We connect with eyeballs, and as a team, it's important that we're all connected and feeling like we're in the same office. Now, in my corporate life, one of the biggest things for me as a leader is that I knew who could take my job next. And this is a really hard mindset to get into. But if we don't know who our successor is, we're never able to take the next step in our careers. So rather than being threatened by it, we need to be very transparent of who our successors are, lifting them up, giving them the opportunities to be out there doing things that they've never gotten to do, and being able to train them as we go. Because a lot of times, we have these meetings behind closed doors. The lower staff has no idea what you do in those meetings, and they seem like these big meetings. And they're nothing, they're nothing, but they seem big meetings to everybody else. And then, as leaders, when leaders get in a meeting together, they talk about, oh, I don't have anybody ready that could be a manager or the next level. But that's because we haven't allowed them behind that closed door. So how can they shadow us in meetings? They don't have to talk. They can just listen so that after that meeting, they can ask you, how did you know that answer to the question? And so forth, so that you can be training them as they go along. Or if there's something that needs to be researched, they can be the one to go and research. We have to be okay to trust and delegate. That we don't have to micromanage everything going on in our department. And this comes back to the beginner's mind, right? That someone might get to the same answer in a different way, and that's okay. And it becomes interesting to everybody else if they get there in a different way, and we can learn from it. Now, when we're going through this, we need to think about, just like a corporation has an advisory board and a board of directors, how do we set that up for our teams? Where they can pick their mentors, where they can pick their sponsors, not that we pick it for them. that they find the people that they have aspirations and where they want to get help, and making sure that they don't necessarily find someone just like themselves. So I'm an extroverted personality. If I'm with another extrovert, they're actually not giving me the information I need. What I need is an introvert to tell me how I make them feel in a meeting, so that I can be cognizant of other types of personalities in the room that I might affect. Give your staff time to innovate. So we talked about having those little teams where you could do test pods. I used to give my staff what I called a 30-minute coffee time break once a month. I would pair 2 staff up every month that didn't work together, and their job was to just think about the business and what we could do to innovate and change, and surface that back up. So how can you think of ways to do that? And lastly, I'll say, it's really important to remember to say thank you. We get so busy that a lot of times we forget to say thank you, we forget to write that note. So even if we need to put that on our calendar to remind us to say thank you today, remember to say thank you to your team. And as you go into this year, make sure that you put these soft skills into your goals plan so that you can actually create what I call a 30-day challenge. It takes 30 days to create a new habit. So what can you commit to that we talked about today that you can start implementing into your team, yourself, and make time each day to be able to do it? What did you like today? What didn't you like today? And what will you do different tomorrow? So that you can take the seat at the table and be that cherished advisor to the rest of your organization. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Amy. We have just a couple more minutes, and we do have one more question. So I think I will ask that question. And I think that probably some of the attributes that you've spoken about somehow wrapped together are connected with this. The question is, and I learned a new acronym here, how do you create and promote DOHC? Do you know what DOHC stands for? Direct, open, honest communication in an organization.
Okay, so the question being direct, open, honest communication. That starts from leadership. So I'm not sure how many of you do 360-degree feedback in your organization. So we have few people here. This is a really important tool because the people that evaluate you are your staff, your colleagues, people from other departments, and your supervisors. And it starts giving you a different way to view how you're showing up in every type of organization. Now, when you do that as a leader, and you respond to the results that you get, some of them you're gonna like, some of them you're not gonna like so much, and then in your team meetings, actually bring it up and say, what I heard you say I did well at was this, and what I didn't do well at was this, and these are the things that I'm thinking about changing. And if you have any other suggestions, I'm open to it. It's really important that you create that open feedback loop so that people aren't afraid to speak up and talk to you, and so that you feel like you can keep improving in the role that you're in as well.
Great, thank you so much. Just before we close, I will mention a couple things. One, as I mentioned earlier, and as you know, a couple rooms down in Augustus 1, we will have the networking section. Please stick around if you can for an extra half an hour or hour or so. Past experience suggests you'll find it to be a wonderful time. Amy, not sure if you're able to stick with us for a little bit longer there?
So I have two things. One thing is I will be there. I think they set up a table, so if people have questions, I'll be at the reception and we can talk there. Second thing, for those of you that have the Beware of the Grace Notes flyer, one of you, if you open it, it says you're a winner. Anyone see it? All right, well, if you find the golden ticket, someone won this book. If you've got B3 winner on it, and we'll have it at the booth too, and you can come back and get it. Yeah.
Terrific. Thank you. Last thing, thank you to all of our online attendees and for your participation. And Amy Vedder, thank you so much.